Dun, 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 dun.
Hello, and welcome to Pieces of History with Curating Collections. I'm your host, Crystal, a preservation-focused public historian here at Curating Collections, and I'm joined by my husband and producer, Andrew. He is a generally curious individual who has a background in tech and is here to ask whatever questions pop into his mind. This podcast tells the stories of humanity through the objects and the documents that have managed to survive those individuals who created them. Today's episode is going to focus on one specific person in the context of the American Civil War. This episode is the life of one man, the object that we have today, and what we can know when we can't hear from the individuals themselves. This episode is not designed to be a deep dive on timelines or battles or American Civil War decision-making. It's also not meant to be a reconstruction of family trees or specific genealogies. We're looking at the stories of specific individuals. This is A Man, His Hat, and What We Can't Know. One tiny little complaint. I wish this chair didn't spin on its own.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
It just kind of does whatever it wants, but it's okay.
Yeah. I'm so excited. So this interests me a lot. Like, this was really cool, guys. Chat. Give me some big chat energy.
Today, I am really excited to get to show you an artifact that has been in my possession for several years now. It's something that holds a lot of personal value to me, both as a person and as a historian. So I'm really excited to get to share a blue Union Civil War kepi. So this is a blue woolen leather hat that would have been popular style of the American military in the 1860s. So it was an original, over 150 years old now. It's got a leather brim and a small leather band around the front, and on the very front, it's got some brass insignia. It also has the numbers 141 emblazed on the front there. It's very well loved, very well worn. We've got the Union Eagle button on the side here. It's well worn enough that the second Union Eagle button is no longer attached to the hat, but fortunately, I was able to find it and keep it. So I do still have it. It's just no longer attached to the hat itself. Now, this hat is an incredible artifact. One, just on age alone. Dating from the 1860s, it's a textile material. It has no moth damage. It has very little light damage. It's in great shape for its age. And I do know that it dates to the 1860s, so it dates to the American Civil War. It's at the era of that time period. And I know that it belonged to my fourth great-grandfather and Civil War veteran, David Neal. Now, what I don't know is whether or not this hat was the hat that he wore during his service as an American Union soldier. The reason that I don't know that is because the numbers on the front of the hat are 141, and I know that David served with the 97th New York Infantry. So let's take a deeper look at the man himself. David Neal was born in January of 1837 in Waterloo, New York. And before being drafted into the Union Army in 1863, he married his wife, Louisa, and they had 2 children together. At the age of 25, he was drafted into the Union Army into the 97th New York Infantry, Company F, and exactly 2 years and 1 day later, he was discharged in 1865 because the war had come to a close. Following his service in the American Civil War, I was interested in doing research in his life afterwards. Through his occupation and his residence, I was able to trace a story about him in a place that didn't necessarily give me exciting records. Through looking at about 10 different vital records, including a couple state census records, federal census records, and some city directories that I don't have access to, I was able to kind of build a little bit of a picture about certain aspects of his life. Where am I starting?
After the war, he went back to New York.
I love you. That was incredible. It's just so funny.
You can look over at me and smile.
Can I?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm your producer. We have inside jokes.
We do have inside jokes. We're also married. Okay. After the war, he went back to New York, where he worked as a laborer. Shortly thereafter, he ventured into farming, and while working as a farmer, he actually owned outright his own log home. He eventually decided to move to Pennsylvania, where he worked as a carpenter. And while there, he no longer owned his own home, but he mortgaged a house with his family there. Later, he would work odd jobs as an upholsterer while renting a home with his wife in Pennsylvania. It would be around this time that his wife Louisa would pass away after almost 60 years of marriage. Finally retired at the age of 83, David was no longer working and moved in with one of his daughters. And in 1924, at 87 years old, David Neal died of old age and was buried at Oak Hill Cemetery with his wife and was honored with a veteran's gravestone. We know all of this information because we have records. Unfortunately, for the year 1890, we don't have any census records. The census records for the year 1890 were almost entirely destroyed in a fire. Fortunately, we do have the veterans' schedules from that year, and David Neal was included in that record. From there, we learned that David suffered from kidney and liver rheumatism that he listed as a possible side effect from his service. He had been receiving a pension since 1879 and continued to receive it throughout his lifetime. These records tell us what happened. They don't tell us how it felt. Unfortunately, we don't have letters or diaries or first-person accounts from David Neal that talk about his life, that talk about his experiences. We don't have the ability to hear in his own words what he thought and felt about the life that he was living. Unfortunately, this is relatively common throughout world history. While we do have confirmation from the census records that David could read and write, we don't have any records that he created. Materials are also incredibly fragile. Paper is an incredibly difficult thing to preserve. It fades, it ages, it gets brittle. It can be incredibly difficult to keep around. Another issue that we run into across the past is what families or individuals chose to keep. Between moves, deaths, a lack of knowledge on what might be important in the future, it's impossible to know what people of the past got rid of. We as historians have to responsibly handle those gaps. There is a lot of danger in filling gaps with assumptions, in saying, well, from this we can assume or we can imply, because without that first-hand information, we can't factually state how someone felt or thought or experienced a specific event.
So how does context help us when we have that gap?
Context allows us to see these individuals where they are, or were. I should say were, right?
Sure, that makes
Okay,
more
yeah.
sense. They're not there no more.
Context allows us to see these individuals where they were. It humanizes the experiences that they had. I'm just talking to you for a second. You are in tech and you work from home.
Yeah.
So people can assume about you that you spend a lot of time on your computer and you spend a lot of time at your house.
Yeah.
That can be said about pretty much any of your coworkers, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just a fact of the job.
Yeah.
There are things like that for the American Civil War soldier.
Yeah.
I don't know how to word that without saying, like, well, we can assume, because I literally just said why we shouldn't say that. When making statements about someone's specific experience, it's important to take into account the informed context. I'm not adding his voice to the record, but I'm taking into account the fact that being a soldier in the American Civil War would have meant a lot of marching. It would have meant living in an encampment with not great food and very poor sanitation. It would have meant experiencing the horrors of battle at a time when war was awful. You were seeing the people you were fighting against face to face. You were coming up close and personal with death and horrors. So while I'm not able to say that this is how David felt about those experiences, from the record of his unit and from the experiences that we know existed during the American Civil War, we can have a rough picture of what his life as a Union soldier might have looked like based on the informed context.
So if we don't have a definitive point of view from David Neal, why keep his hat around? Like, what makes it special?
The hat obviously meant something to him. He kept it throughout his entire life and then passed it on to his own children. And that's because objects can carry memory and meaning. But that memory and meaning doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to every person who owns that object. For example, my grandfather had a hat that he wore quite frequently while I was growing up from one of his trips that he took into the American West. For him, the memory and meaning behind that hat was the trip itself. It was the experience of going to the place, purchasing that souvenir, and being able to reminisce about that specific experience. For me, the meaning attached to that hat is growing up and seeing my grandfather wearing it. I didn't go on the trip. I didn't see the sights. I didn't purchase the souvenir. But the meaning that it has is directly tied to the person. So the meaning of individual items varies from person to person, and the desire to keep hold of that meaning for future generations is something that propels people to hold on to those things.
So as a historian, how would you handle this type of artifact with its nuanced history and the gaps in our understanding? If you get this in a small historic organization, how do you do that appropriately?
We have to handle incomplete records carefully, using limited, informed context to ensure that we're not adding fact without sources. It's a big responsibility to learn from the past without romanticizing it.
As a person who is coming into a small historic organization, what would you like to see me take away from an object like this?
Ordinary people in historic moments. The everyday lives of the people of the past and what it meant to them. What survives against what's lost. We'll never have a complete record of history, and knowing where what we do have fits in that narrative is an important part of sharing that story. History is often built from fragments, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful. I want to thank you for listening to Pieces of History with Curating Collections. If you work with or care about historic collections, this is the kind of work that I do. Next episode, we will look at another object and another human story through the lens of a historic photo collection. I hope you continue to listen, share, and take a deeper look at the pieces of history around you.